Hello, my name is Mike and welcome to my love affair with showbiz. Today we're going to talk about someone that has been near and dear to me for, pretty much my whole life. And her name is Barbra Streisand. I've done a bunch of these shows and it's ironic that after I did my Judy shows, if you've watched me before, you know that pretty much everything starts and stops with Judy Garland. But Barbra is second. And I'm going to actually start from the beginning of how I discovered her. Okay, here's this album. See, it's the second Barbra Streisand album. Okay, so this album was in the window of a store where I grew up in Tenafly, New Jersey. Warm Rafts. It was this record book card store, a very small store. Back in the day, those stores thrived. Today, forget it. It is too small. The cost would have to be too high. But back then, this album was in the window, the second Barbra Streisand album. And I passed it. Our junior high school was a little away from where Warm Rafts was. And if anybody in Tenafly, New Jersey is listening to this, you're going to know exactly the store I'm talking about, which just closed like 10 years ago. I mean, it was like open for like 60, 70 years. Quite amazing. Okay, so I kept passing and I kept looking at this cover and admiring the hair. Mind you, folks, I'm in second or third grade. So what do I know about hair? What do I know about style? What do I know about what I was going to become very interested in my adulthood? Well, I kept passing this. Now, in my mind, I kept passing it for a year. Time goes very slow when you're a kid, so maybe it was only 2 weeks. Who knows? Or maybe it was 2 years. But I finally bought the album because I like the hairstyle. Isn't that weird? So I'm listening to it, and of course, I totally fell in love with the voice. I mean, Barbra Streisand, we're all used to her voice now. It's like when you think of Katharine Hepburn, she talks like this. In the beginning of her acting career, she was very odd. We're all used to her now, but in the beginning she was very unique. So is Barbra Streisand's voice. It was very different, and it was great. And of course, I started collecting all her albums from 1962 or 63 on. And through this episode, you'll be looking at all the albums I have. The last album before CDs came was the Broadway album. And of course I have it. And in my living room, I actually have a very big poster framed of the cover of the Broadway album. It's a really great photograph, but the album is great too. It was really, in my mind, Barbra Streisand's last fantastic album. That doesn't mean I haven't bought every single CD she's had since, okay? And the concerts are great because when you see a true artist in concert, you really get the essence of them because they're motivated. They get off by the audience. It's a real symbiotic relationship at a concert where people understand the music of the people they're seeing, and the person who's obviously performing is very aware that people in the audience are very aware of their career. It's really a wonderful thing. Basically, she records albums now, and it's usually for political purposes. And if you've ever heard Barbra speak, she's extremely intelligent. She was a very smart student, but her career started, she never went to college. You would not know she never went to college. She speaks very eloquently. Of course, she's very political. My politics are very much in accord with hers. And I think every so often, if I didn't agree with her politics, would I love her as much as I do? Well, basically I love her because of her talent, and that transcends politics. So I think the answer is yes, but who knows? She's a liberal Democrat. She truly believes in mankind and global and helping people. She's great. She was recently on Bill Maher, which is very radical. And of course, it's all on YouTube. Okay, now, lo and behold, so I get this album, and then the Judy Garland show starts. And I didn't know this at the time, but I know this now. That Barbra did, she was becoming Barbra Streisand, and she would be on talk shows. She was on The Dinah Shore Show, Bob Hope, I believe Gary Moore, definitely Gary Moore, because I have a picture where Carol Burnett and Gary Moore are in the picture. I can't imagine both of them being somewhere else if she wasn't in the show. But She did the Judy Garland show. Okay, so this is something I know about. All right, 1963, it was maybe one of the seventh. Actually, now you would think Judy Garland would be jealous of young talent. You know, she was, even though she was only in her early 40s, she was in the twilight of her career. I don't know if she knew it or not, but you'd think somebody in their 40s would be very jealous, I don't even know if resentful of an up-and-coming personality. But that's not the case. Judy Garland loved Barbra Streisand, supported Barbra Streisand, and it is wonderful to see on the show that she is trying to make Barbra as comfortable as possible. But this is the neat thing about that show. Before the Judy Garland show, Barbra was known as, kooky was the word. She dressed in clothes from, the old clothing shops, the vintage clothing shops. And her hair, was a little ratty, and her skin, it was probably very good. She was only in her late teens. But it looked like she had acne, and she didn't shower. I know that's a strange thing to say. She actually kind of looked a little dirty in the beginning. And I don't know if I'm using the right word, dirty, but she definitely looked unkempt. Let's say that. Okay, the Judy Garland show comes, and she looks great. Her hair was this, because it was basically taken at the same time. So, of course, I love that. She was wearing a very nice dress, and she sang this song. Now, mind you, I remember in spurts the Judy Garland show. I was only 9 years old. I was a Judy fan back then, but it was only becoming. I wasn't, my memories are shoddy, but I do remember Barbra Streisand singing Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered. It's funny, she also sang the very famous Judy Barbra duet of Happy Days Are Here Again and Get Happy. I don't remember that at all, but I remember her solo song. I mean, she probably sang a few solos, but Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered. I have since seen it on YouTube, and of course I have all the Judy DVDs. It is amazing. You really need to see it. If you're interested in Barbra, see it on YouTube. She sings it very seriously. Then she starts going into a medley of different songs, and they're kind of funny. And when Barbra Streisand did her comedy songs, which she did a lot of, she was a very gifted comedian. She's always on pitch. She's never losing the essence of her voice, which makes the funny songs that much better. Like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. This is something she did on her first album, but it was part of her nightclub show. She did nightclubs before she was signed by Columbia, which, let me tell you, she's still recording on Columbia. How do you like that? How many people can say their whole recording career they have stayed with one recording company? Neat, huh? Okay, so she's singing this, and I am just loving it, and I still do. From the Judy Garland show is when she was signed for the CBS Specials, which I also saw for the first time. I'm really proud of that. Not in reruns, but when they were first aired on TV, I saw them. This is a box set, it's kind of neat, of all her TV specials. Folks, if you love Barbra Streisand, you're going to be familiar with the TV specials. But if you only kind of like Barbra Streisand, but you don't really collect and, you're not that much into it, see My Name is Barbra, and Color Me Barbra. That was the first and second. You may have the albums, but they were TV specials. It is so hard to describe how amazingly talented she is. She's like 21 and 22 years old. Now think of it. What did I graduate from college? 18, 19, 20? I graduated from college when I was 22. She had, and I was young. I was what? I probably had the emotions of a 14-year-old boy. Here she has already done the nightclub. She has done these 2 TV specials. They are something. There are no guest stars on the TV specials. She is singing. She's doing comedy. Again, very gifted comedian. The last part of the TV shows where she sings a concert medley. And it's all mostly all live. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so now the Judy Garland show, Ethel Merman was supposedly a cameo, but obviously they knew she was going to be on because they filmed her when she starts singing in her seat in the audience. Then she comes up. The three of them sing not a medley, a song. There's no business like show business. Okay, so we have Judy, Ethel, and Barbra. And Ethel spoke about Barbra as the last of the belters. And in a sense, that's true. Where her voice was loud. There wasn't a subtlety to it. I take that back. There was a definite subtlety because Barbra was this amazing singer. She immediately understood songs. Usually great singers are not great when they first begin, but they sing so much. Rosemary Clooney talks about this when after she went through a very bad period and she actually was in a mental facility. She had a total nervous breakdown in the mid-60s and she came back and her voice wasn't as technical as it was back in the 50s, but she understood songs, and the difference is phenomenal. Now, it's funny, I'm talking about Rosemary Clooney now when it's about Barbra Streisand. But same thing with Barbra Streisand. She understood a lyric. It's not just her singing songs that you like listening to, though you may like listening to and you don't necessarily have to understand why you like listening to it, right? I mean, if something is joyful, we don't have to question it. But of course I do. Because I'm curious, what makes these really famous people tick? Okay, so Barbra, the voice. You know, it's funny. She does these interviews. She doesn't do many interviews, but of course, in today, there's a lot on YouTube because she's been around so long. She doesn't really talk about her voice as something she truly honored, she truly treasured. Her acting is what she wants to talk about. Ironically, I don't know if it's ironic because she obviously was a very famous movie star for very many years. In the 70s, who was it? Barbra Streisand, Diana Ross, she had her moment. In the movies, she had more of a moment, but in the movies, it was the 70s with Lady Sings the Blues and Mahogany. Aretha Franklin, and that was basically it, of the 70s. Okay, so the reason why I said her movie career was ironic is she's only done, I believe, under 20 films. Now let's compare that to Nicole Kidman. Okay, she's an actress, obviously. She has easily done 3 times more movies than Barbra ever did, and maybe she's 50, maybe she's even younger. Meaning, there's going to be many more movies coming out of Nicole, and I wish there'd be more movies coming out of Barbra. There was talk for years and years about her doing Gypsy, and what a sin she never did Gypsy. Sin. Just a sin. So she doesn't really talk about her voice all that much. Well, for us Barbra fans, it's her voice. We've all seen her movies. So she would rather talk about her movie career. So we're going to do both. She was signed for Funny Girl. She did the show Funny Girl. She even mentions on the Judy Garland show that she was signed for Funny Girl. And of course, Ethel Merman did Gypsy. So on the Judy Garland show, she tells Ethel and Judy that her next project is going to be the show Funny Girl. Ethel Merman gets very excited because not the lyricist, of course, for Gypsy, it was Stephen Sondheim, but the person who wrote the music was Jules Stein. So she mentions that. Okay, the 3 of them then go into this song, There's No Business Like Show Business. Well, you could really never sing with Ethel Merman because she was so loud. Plus, this was very famous of Ethel. She rarely sang duets looking at the person she was singing with. She always sang in front. She always sang to the camera, to the audience. She never turned to the side to sing. So she's singing, Judy's singing, of course. Judy and Barbra were old friends, and Judy was not intimidated by anybody. Hell, it was her show. But Judy notices that Barbra's kind of getting lost in the background, and she grabs Barbra's arm to kind of pull her back in. My guess is when you see Barbra, and of course I've seen this like 100 times, it maybe wasn't in her key, so she really wasn't singing. And yet, Judy, Ethel, they were all altos, so it's hard, but it's very neat that Judy kind of takes Barbra's arm to get her more involved in the 3 of them, which is kind of historical now, right? We have Judy Garland, Ethel Merman, and Barbra Streisand in one little scene. Really neat. Okay, so she does Funny Girl, and of course, in a sense, the rest is history. But we're going to talk about that. Barbara, Funny Girl was, the show itself wasn't really a major success. Barbra Streisand was a major success. In fact, I can even compare it to The Boy from Oz, which was a musical on the life of Peter Allen that Hugh Jackman started. That show sucked. I could not believe how bad. I couldn't believe that a show that inferior would make it to Broadway. But Hugh Jackman's performance, I am sure, was very comparable to Barbra Streisand's performance in Funny Girl. He was great. Great is a little word to describe how good he was. The charisma, the talent, just beamed. It was amazing. And, you know, ironically, I believe, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think I am, when I think Hugh Jackman did it for a while, maybe a little under 2 years, which can you imagine doing 8 shows for 2 years? That's a long, long time. But when he decided to get out, and he probably had movie roles because, you know, he has a whole career, right? He's thriving now. We should do a few more musicals, though. So when he finally left the show, they decided to close it. I think they realized that nobody could do what Hugh Jackman did to the role, and the show itself was so bad that they didn't want to try. Okay, but, you know, Hugh Jackman, if you like his singing, buy the soundtrack to it, because it is Peter Allen's music, and Peter Allen's music was very good. It wasn't done well in the show, but that's for another show to do, My Love Affair with Showbiz. But, of course, Peter Allen was Liza Minnelli's first husband, so it's like this incestuous thing. You know, all these people that I talk about, they seem to be a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Okay, so, Funny Girl comes out, and of course Barbra is the toast of the town. Though, ironically, Carol Channing won the Tony that year for Hello, Dolly. Now, I also saw Hello, Dolly. I didn't see Funny Girl. I was really not aware at the time. It was a few years later that I became very aware of the show Funny Girl, and that was years before the movie was done. Which, of course, you know, Barbra Streisand became a super duper pooper duper star after Funny Girl. So I didn't see Carol Channing in the show. I saw it maybe a year and a half after it opened, and Ginger Rogers was the star of the show then. She was the second person to replace Carol Channing. David Merrick, the producer, had this amazing idea of getting these old, very popular stars to take over the, you know, Dolly, Levi. And there was Martha Raye, who was also on the Judy Garland show, Phyllis Diller, of all people, who did it on Broadway, and Ginger Rogers, and there were a few others. The show, not talking about Ginger Rogers' performance, but the show of Hello, Dolly is very good. It's very tight. You may wonder why. It was actually Broadway's longest running hit before Broadway changed, where you have like Phantom of the Opera and Les Mis that last 15 cats, 15, 17 years. I think Hello, Dolly was 5 or 6 years, which was phenomenal in the time. I think the longest one before that was My Fair Lady, which wasn't much more than 4 years. But, of course, My Fair Lady, probably one of the top 5 musicals, the greatest musicals ever. The musical itself, and of course, that was Julie Andrews' coming out role. Okay, so Barbra does Funny Girl. The toast of the town. She's doing these TV specials. I think the first TV special, My Name is Barbra, was actually filmed during the run of Funny Girl. So here which was obviously filmed in New York. You really want to see these TV shows because they're so entertaining. They're just wonderful. They're wonderful. They're wonderful. The talent Barbra Streisand has is so phenomenal. It's really something to behold. And there aren't many people you can say that about. Of course you can say that about Judy at a very young age. Really, at 12 years old, Judy Garland basically sounded like the Judy Garland we know. And their voice only matured and it was better. But of course, in the last years of Judy, her voice was... It wasn't that her voice was shot as much as her body was shot. The drugs really took a toll. I mean, she only died at 47, and really, she looked like she was 90 years old. Very sad. The spirit was always there with Judy. But with Barbra, I, of course, have all of her CDs, and she does mainly concerts now, the voice is held up quite well. She can't, the upper register is a little off, but we all lose our upper registers as we get older. That's just the way it is. Ironic, and there I'm using that word again, Barbra, who never really wanted to speak much about her voice or really put it on the pedestal that it should be on, because it really is a voice of the ages. Still, she sounds great. Now, wouldn't you think she'd lose her voice? I mean, she didn't really do anything to protect it. You know, Tony Bennett talks about he has to vocalize, you know, for hours before a show now to get up to, you know, he's older now. And Julie Andrews talked about that too, that she has to vocalize before she does a concert. But Barbra gives you the impression she just goes out and she starts singing. And she starts singing, but oh, that voice, it really hits the soul. It's just wonderful. So to me, as much as I love her movies, and of course I have all of them on DVD, I love Barbra for her voice because it really transcends time, and I like that. Her movies are obviously of the ages. Okay, so she signed for Funny Girl, of course.